Deals with Florida when they wrote their state constitution in 1868. Okay, the name of this, and I'm going to close this out here. This is the one that I want right here. Let's see, let's go to it right here. This is called History of Florida's Felony Disenfranchisement Provision. History of Florida's Felony Disenfranchisement Provision. This is from the Brennan Center for Justice, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Brennan, B-R-E-N-N-A-N, Brennan Center for Justice, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. And it talks about the constitutional provision disenfranchising people with felony convictions was originally enacted in the aftermath of the Civil War in 1868. So Civil War, we know, ends 1865. 13th Amendment is ratified December 6, 1865, adopted December 18th, 1865. Okay. Aftermath of the Civil War in 1860, aftermath of the Civil War in 1868, as one of several tools to suppress the votes of newly freed slaves. Okay, the constitutional provision disenfranchising or taking away somebody's right to vote if they're convicted of a felony was originally enacted in the aftermath of the Civil War in 1868 as one of several tools to suppress the votes of newly freed slaves. 100 years later, in 1968, the provision was reenacted despite its history of discrimination and its continuing racially disparate effects. Felony disenfranchisement has long been used to diminish the voting power of Florida's African-American population, and the law continues to have that effect. Okay. So this is all about targeting African-Americans and suppressing our vote, which diminishes our political power. Felony disenfranchisement has long been used to diminish the voting power of Florida's African-American population. And the law continues to have that effect. So this is why oftentimes you hear me say that we need to stop telling African-Americans to exercise your right to vote. Stop telling African-Americans to exercise your right to vote. If you want to exercise, you go to the gym and work out. You don't vote for exercise. You vote for power. You vote for power. You vote for policies that are beneficial for you, your family, your communities, and your people. Okay? Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. You don't vote for exercise, you vote for power. When we change the purpose of voting, when we change our messaging and explaining to people why you vote, then you will get better results. As long as you think you vote for symbolism, as long as you think that you vote because Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and John Lewis and Hosea Williams fought for you to have the right to vote, okay? And as long as you believe nonsense like it doesn't matter who you vote for, just vote, that's nonsense, because you can be voting for people who are working to dismantle the legacy of Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and Rosa Parks and John Lewis and Hosea Williams, etc. Okay? So you have to vote with purpose in understanding policies, understanding politics, understanding law, understanding how these policies impact you. Whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans, and what's good for African Americans are good for America in general. Whose policies will do the least amount of harm? Which candidate can create an environment for you to push your agenda the farthest and get the most accomplished? Who will protect gains that have already been made? who will protect gains that have already been made? And one of the problems is we don't understand how to assess gains and progress already made. So we will operate under an illusion that no progress has been made, therefore nothing's at stake. And as we just saw with affirmative action, as you saw a few months ago, affirmative action in college admissions was overturned by a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court that's operating based upon an ultra-conservative agenda. And that 6-3 Supreme Court was put in place by Donald Trump, who got, and he got nominations provided to him from lists that came from the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society, two ultra-conservative right-wing think tanks. They provided him lists of names, and he got 226 federal judges confirmed, which is a lifetime appointment. He got 3 Supreme Court justices confirmed. This was after Attorney General, that was after Merrick Garland was blocked in 2016 by Senator Mitch McConnell, and Republicans took back control of the U.S. Senate in 2014. They blocked 103 federal judge nominations that President Barack Obama made, and they blocked Merrick Garland as Obama's Supreme Court nomination. They did not even give Merrick Garland a hearing. So when Donald Trump becomes president through the Electoral College, and most people don't understand how the Electoral College works, okay? When Donald Trump becomes president through the Electoral College, he gets Neil Gorsuch confirmed, he gets Brett Kavanaugh confirmed, and then after Amy Coney Barrett dies, they push through after Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, they push through Amy Coney Barrett right before the 2020 presidential election and get a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court locked in, and they are serving for life. These are lifetime appointments. So then when the Dobbs decision comes out dealing with taking away the protections for abortions based upon the 14th Amendment, that gets struck down by the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. Okay. And this has been protected rights for women since 1973. Then you have affirmative action in college admissions struck down by the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. You had President Joe Biden's executive order when it came to student loan forgiveness, which would have moved 500,000 African-American families from a negative net worth to a positive net worth. This gets struck down by Donald Trump's 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. So because you had people who didn't understand what was at stake in 2016 and did not understand that one of the lasting effects and probably the most important lasting effect of a president is the president's Supreme Court justices. George H.W. Bush, the father, George H.W. Bush, nominated Clarence Thomas in 1993. I think it was 1993. Clarence Thomas is still on the bench ruling, especially on cases against African Americans 31 years later. George H.W. Bush is dead. Clarence Thomas is still on the Supreme Court ruling on cases that impact Americans, especially African Americans. So, see, we have to understand political self-defense and understand defense and offense at the same time and fight against us. This is why we have to stop telling African Americans to exercise your right to vote. You vote for power. You vote to acquire power, to put people in place, to pass laws that are beneficial to you. Now, laws are not only going to be beneficial to African Americans because based upon Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination and fairly assisted programs, it's illegal to have policies only from one race of people. Race-based policies are illegal. You can have policies that are for minorities. You can do that, but policies only for African Americans, only for one race of people, that's illegal. Okay. And I talked about this when I do my presentations dealing with reparations, when I spoke to the Detroit Reparations Task Force, March 2nd, 2024, when I did my presentation, and you can watch that lecture that I did on our social media platforms, my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Also, I'll put it on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll get it up there as well. But if you go to archives.gov, U.S. National Archives, and I'm going to pull up a slide from the presentation here because I show this to people because unfortunately many of our people don't understand law, don't understand history. But most Americans don't understand law and history either. I show this to people so we can deal with facts and evidence, okay, because proper documentation ends all conversation. Section 601 of the, let's go to this slide here, of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And if you just Google, why are race-based policies illegal at the federal level? Usually the first hit that comes up is this right here. Title 6 of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Non-Discrimination and Fairly Assisted Programs, Section 601. No person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So you can write policies. Now, this is at archives.gov. Archives.gov is the U.S. National Archives, the U.S. National Archives. You can also read the Presidential Records Act of 1978 at the U.S. National Archives website also, because it doesn't say a president can keep classified documents once they leave office. That's not what the Presidential Records Act says, but you can read it for yourself. So you can have policies for minority groups, things like that. And I hear people operating based upon this misinformation out here by black social media disinformation agents, podcast pimps, and social media whores out here just lying to our people, not providing any evidence. But I hear people saying, I don't want minority programs. I don't want minority set-aside programs, things like this. We want policies only for African Americans. That's not going to happen. That's illegal. You're not going to have policies only from one race in the first place. But as somebody who managed an African American owned company that had government contracts with the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, and state of Michigan, and who was also a minority owned business and had minority business status, because in various municipalities, in various states, in various counties, you get minority certification, and it gives you an advantage in bidding on contracts. Okay, you get extra points in the point system when they determine who to get a contract to if you are a minority owned business. All right. So the question that I would ask people, having that experience, having managed won numerous government contracts, having managed a business that had the majority of our employees were African Americans, the question I would ask people is, why wouldn't we focus on being the minority that's getting the majority of the benefits? Why would we not focus on being the minority getting the majority of the set-aside contracts? Things like this, after having actually done it. Now, if you just listen to somebody on YouTube that doesn't have any experience, or somebody on social media has no experience in doing this, and they're just spouting talking points, okay, they're just trying to get more clicks and likes on social media posts, then they'll say some stupid stuff like that. They'll say something, oh, we only want race-specific policies. These are people who never read the 1964 Civil Rights Act, never been involved in writing public policy for a major city. I've been involved in writing public policy for the city of Detroit, okay, which is how I learned about this federal law. Because our corporate counsel, I was on a committee to write an executive order for the city of Detroit. Our corporate counsel, at our first meeting, Sharon McPhail told us it's illegal to write policies that are only for African Americans, but we can write policies for Detroit-based residences, and the majority, the population of Detroit was 85% Black at that time. Okay, so you have to understand how to navigate throughout the system. Read this here. So this is at archives.gov, U.S. National Archives, Civil Rights Act 1964. Okay, archives.gov, and it goes through and it gives some of the history of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It has the actual text here that you can read it. But if you just search for 601, okay, we're going to go right here. We want Title VI. Title VI, Non-Discrimination and Fairly Assisted Programs. This is it right here. Now, most of these people you watch on social media don't understand law, and they're not going to tell you this. And they've never been involved in writing public policy or anything like this. I've done all that. That's how I know this. So I'm not talking about something that I saw in a documentary, even though I'm in 7 documentaries. I'm not talking about something that I read in the book, even though I read numerous books. I'm talking about from actual experience, actually doing it. Okay, so read that. Now, let's go back to this from the Brennan Center for Justice. This deals with felony disenfranchisement law, and this deals with the state of Florida. But we see similar things in other states when they start rewriting their state constitutions after slavery ends, but especially after Reconstruction ends in 1877. Okay. Criminal disenfranchisement in Reconstruction, Florida. In 1868, Florida dramatically expanded criminal disenfranchisement. 1868, 3 years after chattel slavery ends, 3 years after the 13th Amendment. For the first time in 1868, the state of Florida barred from the polls, from the voting polls, all people with felony convictions. Okay, all people with felony convictions. So before slavery, like white people with felony convictions, it was all right to vote. After slavery ends, now these black people want to vote. Oh, no. We can't. We have to prevent a Negro legislature. Well, we have to prevent this. What was the fear? The fear was African Americans gaining political power and being able to vote, hold office in state legislatures, being able to write policies that white people had to abide by, write laws that white people had to abide by, and vote on those laws. This was at a time when the African American population in Florida was 48%. Okay, in 1868, African Americans were 48% of the population of the state of Florida. And they said that and white people said they were doing this to prevent a Negro legislature, to prevent a Negro legislature. So they put this felony disenfranchisement law in place in 1868, and you lost your right to vote for life. You lost your right to vote for life. But not only that, what they did was they expanded the number of laws that were classified as felonies. Okay, so let's look at this. For the first time in 1868, the state of Florida barred from the polls all people with felony convictions, while at the same time creating a host of new felony crimes. The list of disqualifying infamous crimes was expanded as well. African Americans were disproportionately disenfranchised under the new provision because state policies at the time were designed to control newly freed slaves. State policies at the time were designed to control newly freed slaves through the criminal justice system. In 1865, the Florida state legislature enacted black codes as a way to control freedmen, former slaves, freedmen. A crucial component of the codes was an expansion of the criminal justice system to deal with minor offenses, that legislators believed blacks were more likely to commit and that had been formerly punished by their masters. Okay? Crimes that they believed blacks were more likely to commit and crimes that had been formerly punished by their masters. The black codes had their desired effect. By the 1870s to 1880s, estimates show that more than 95% of the convicts in the Florida convict camps were African American. More than 95% of the convicts in the Florida convict camp were African American at a time when we're 48% of the population in the state of Florida. A captain in one of the camps at the time noted it was possible to send a Negro to prison on almost any pretext, but difficult to get a white man there. Okay. And then they talk about how we were 48% of the population and how this was done to prevent a Negro legislature. Okay. So read the rest of this here. This is about the fear of African Americans gaining political power, utilizing political power. History of Florida's felony disenfranchisement provision. This is at BrennanCenter.org. BrennanCenter.org. All right. Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 2 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles, and I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay, I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country. Been hosting the African History Network show 14 years, but we look at there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at, the 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wapakamane, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class. Okay, so you can register for this. This content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $the AHN Show through Cash App, $the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $the AHN Show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment, take care of what needs to be done. All right. Okay, let's go back to story here. Now, quickly dealing with felony disenfranchisement. Okay, then we're going to move to the next story. A lot of people don't know. So when we look at the history of felony disenfranchisement, right, especially in these former Confederate states, there's a good article that we use in the second class that I teach, dealing with Black resistance movements, Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. That's the second class that I created and that I teach. This is a good article here from history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. This deals with how Jim Crow era laws suppressed the African-American vote for generations. How Jim Crow era laws suppressed the African-American vote for generations. And one of the things they talk about in here is the all-white primary. So they talk about the Mississippi State Convention of 1890. They helped kicked off a lot of this. Now, the poll tax law in 1889, Florida instituted their poll tax law, which was a tax that you had to pay to register to vote. That was the year before the Mississippi State Convention. But after Mississippi has their state convention, rewrites their state constitution, impose poll taxes and literacy tests, things of this nature, obstacles to the 15th Amendment, we're going to see other states do the same thing. Georgia, Alabama, 1901, Georgia, I think it was 1910, South Carolina, 1895, Louisiana, 1898. Okay. But so you have literacy tests that are put in place. Okay. This is one of the ways that they try to suppress the African-American vote. Poll taxes, but also all white primaries. Now, this is something that the state of Texas did, where Crystal Mason is being persecuted right now. All white primaries were instituted by Democrats at the time. Now, this is before the party realignment was completed in 1968 with the election of Richard Nixon. And you had a shifting in the parties, which began with the party realignment begins in 1928, which is what is known as the Lily White Movement of 1928. The Lily White Movement of 1928. Okay. And this was the effort to push African Americans out of the Republican Party. And we started slowly going over to the Democratic Party. Okay. There was a article that I did a 3-hour lecture dealing with the history of why African Americans switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. There was a piece from one of these Chicago publications, and it dealt with the beginning of the Lily White movement. This was an effort to push African Americans out of the Republican Party and get Herbert Hoover elected as president. So Republicans appealed to Southern segregationist Democrats in 5 former Confederate states to get them to vote for Herbert Hoover. Okay. And they started ignoring the needs and concerns of African Americans and started pushing us out of the Republican Party, started ignoring the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, largely as a result of the movie The Birth of a Nation. And we started slowly going over to the Democratic Party. So by the time the 1960 presidential election takes place between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, 60% of African Americans had already switched over to the Democratic Party. And one of the things that caused the switch was we found Even though we were leery of President Roosevelt, we found him to be largely more receptive to our issues. But also in 1948, President Harry Truman, when President Harry Truman ran for president in 1948, the Democrats had a pro-civil rights agenda, And what this did was this caused Southern segregationists to separate, some Southern segregationists to separate and form the Dixiecrat Party. And Strom Thurmond ran for president in 1948 as a Dixiecrat. Okay. If we look here, and the Dixiecrats were anti-civil rights. If we look here, this is the piece I was looking for. This is from ChicagoMag.com. ChicagoMag.com. And this is called How the Party of Lincoln Lost Virtually the Entire Black Vote in 88 Years. How the Party of Lincoln lost virtually the entire black vote in 88 years. In 1928, the Chicago Defender, a black-owned newspaper, warned the GOP that it was in danger of alienating African Americans. They did not listen, and the fall came fast. Now, this is from July 29, 2016. The point I want to go to here is when they talk about the Lily White movement, okay? And this was a Southern strategy that was implemented by the Republican Party. Here's an excerpt of what Robert Abbott, founder of the Chicago Defender, wrote. Let's see here. So what the Defender, okay, finally in an October 20th, 1928 editorial entitled What We Want, the Chicago Defender made a dramatic announcement. We want justice in America, and we mean to get it. If 50 years of support to the Republican Party doesn't get us justice, then we must of necessity shift our allegiance to new quarters. End quote. It was the first time the Chicago Defender had failed to endorse the Republican presidential candidate since 1912. In the run-up to the 1912 election, Woodrow Wilson, despite a typical history as a Southern Democrat, had reached out to black voters, even though he was a white supremacist, including leaders like Dr. W.B. Du Bois. After Woodrow Wilson's victory, the paper, the Chicago Defender reported that a substantial number of blacks supported him. Once in office, President Woodrow Wilson immediately alienated his black supporters. Okay. Now, Robert Abbott, founder of the Chicago Defender, is a diehard Republican his whole life. But with Herbert Hoover, who is explicitly, I wouldn't describe him as a racist, but he's interested in what he called a lily white Republican Party, This is after generations in which the Republican Party has stood for racial justice. So this was the lily white movement that begins in 1928. Okay. So scrolling down later in the article, it says the Republican National Convention was held in Chicago that summer, which to those at the Chicago Defender made the near absence of African Americans all the more galling. So now they're talking about, let's see, the Defender, what period of time? Right, it must be talking about right about 1928 here. Okay, the Republican National Convention was held in Chicago that summer, which to those at the Defender made the near absence of African Americans all the more galling. So consistently had Herbert Hoover, President Herbert Hoover, pursued his policy of making the party lily white, that the newspaper had to fight even to get African American delegates seated. Okay, so read the rest of this, but and research the lily white movement of 1928. the Lily White Movement of 1928. And this was the effort by Republicans to push African Americans out of the Republican Party and to ignore our needs and concerns, etc. All right, now going back to this piece here from history.com, the official website of the History Channel, how Jim Crow era laws suppressed the African American vote for generations. Okay, in this piece, they talk about the all-white primaries that took place in Texas. And this led to the lawsuit of Smith versus Allwright in 1944, which was won by Thurgood Marshall. All-white primaries. When literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, and the many other ways to circumvent the 15th Amendment did not work to suppress Black voter turnout, white legislators in several southern states used all white primaries to all but eliminate Black voters' presence in the electoral process. In Texas, for example, the Texas state legislature gave the Democratic Party the authority to set its own rules. The party determined that it was for white voters only. It was for white voters only, excluding African Americans from its elections and effectively making local electoral politics dominated by one party that upheld Jim Crow laws. After a white election official blocked an African American man named Lonnie E. Smith the right to vote in the 1940 Texas Democratic primary, the NAACP's Thurgood Marshall and William H. Hastie, Hastie, challenged the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1944, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the case Smith versus Allwright that the Texas white primary system was unconstitutional. Quote, the right to vote in a primary for the nomination,
to be famous.
the right to vote for primary.
I've got to make something good outside.
The right to vote in a primary for the, and let me pull this back up. Hold on. They had a video playing. I don't want that playing in this broadcast here. Let's go back down to this here. Let me go back to this. Okay, it said the right to vote in a primary for the nomination of candidates without discrimination by the state is a right secured by the Constitution, said the U.S. Supreme Court in an 8-1 U.S. Supreme Court decision. Okay, and that was Smith versus Allwright. Right here. Okay, so read the rest of that. The name of this article is How Jim Crow Era Laws Suppressed the African American Vote for Generations. Okay, and that's at history.com, which is the official website of the History Channel. Okay, now okay, so check out those pieces. Now, there was back in March when we talked about Crystal Mason's conviction being overturned. We talked to, on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we talked to her attorney then, and we mentioned a case of a white GOP official. And I want to look at this article here. NBC News had an article on this, and this is to show a contrast between the way Crystal Mason is being treated and how white people are being treated when they're convicted, in the rare cases when they're convicted of voter fraud. Let me pull this up. Okay, Georgia Republican Party official voted illegally 9 times. So this article right here from NBCnews.com. Georgia Republican Party official voted illegally 9 times, judge rules. Brian Pritchard, Pritchard, first vice chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, was fined $5,000 for voting illegally and registering to vote while serving a sentence for a felony, a judge ruled. Now, he wasn't sentenced to prison time. Crystal Mason filed a provisional ballot that was not counted, and she was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Okay, now here's Brian Pritchard. Okay, Republican official in Georgia, first vice chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, another former Confederate state, Georgia, that has the largest Confederate monument out of anywhere in the country, called Stone Mountain. And on the side of Stone Mountain, they have carved into it. And I've been to Stone Mountain. I've been on top of Stone Mountain. I've walked up the side of Stone Mountain. They have the carvings of General Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and Thomas Stonewall Jackson, 3 Confederate traitors that they call hero, all slave owners. A judge ruled this week that a top Georgia, now this article is from March 28th, 2024. Now this article came out the same day that I think it was the same day, I think it was the same day of her conviction being overturned. Yeah, Crystal Mason's conviction was overturned Thursday, March 28th, 2024. The same day this article came out. A judge ruled this week that a top Georgia Republican Party official who has promoted former President Donald Trump's claims of widespread voter fraud affecting the outcome of the 2020 presidential election, this genius has repeatedly voted illegally, a judge ruled that week. Okay, so here you have Brian Pritchard, a top Georgia Republican Party official who's pushing the big lie, and white people in Georgia are pissed off that African Americans voted and got Biden and Harris elected, but also Senator Raphael Warnock and Senator John Ossoff as well. This guy was pushing the big lie, and a judge found him guilty of repeatedly voting illegally. He found that he voted illegally 9 times. Brian Pritchard, the first vice chairman of the Georgia Republican Party and a conservative talk show host, was fined $5,000 for voting illegally and registering to vote while serving a sentence for a felony conviction. Brian Pritchard was also ordered not to commit further violations, to face public reprimand for his conduct, and to pay the state election board's investigative costs. In a 25-page ruling Wednesday, administrative law judge Lisa Boggs, B-O-G-G-S, affirmed the board's finding that Brian Pritchard had voted, check this out, had voted illegally 9 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He voted illegally 9 times in defiance of his extended probation in connection with a pair of felony convictions dating back nearly 30 years. So he had to pay a $5,000 fine for voting illegally 9 times. In Texas, they sentenced Crystal Mason to 5 years in prison for voting once, and her provisional ballot was not counted. And now Texas District Attorney Phil Sorrells of Tarrant County wants the her conviction reinstated. You can't make this stuff up. White man votes illegally 9 times, gets fined $5,000. Black woman votes illegally. They say illegally once. She was not told that she could not vote once, and her vote doesn't count. She gets sentenced to 5 years in prison. You can't make this stuff up. Brian Pritchard was initially sentenced in 1996 to 3 years probation in connection with felony forgery charges in Pennsylvania, according to the ruling. Okay, read the rest of this article here. This is Brian again. Great upstanding citizen. You know, he values voting so much, he voted illegally 9 times. A judge found, a judge ruled. That's not me saying it. All right, now, lastly, last article on this subject. Some people may ask the question, we talked about some of the history of felony disenfranchisement laws and targeting African Americans, right? After slavery ends, to suppress the African American vote, to suppress our political power, okay? Did you know that let me phrase the question like this. Back in, I think it was 2020, when Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, he was thinking about running again for president, right? And one of the things he was saying was that if you are a convicted felon, you should be able to vote from prison, okay? And you had a lot of people who were laughing at him, saying he was crazy, didn't know what he was talking about. Okay. Now, sometimes he doesn't know sometimes he does sound crazy, but it's not because of that. Okay. He was right on that accord. He was right in that instance. All right. I have some disagreements with him. Sometimes he's just, it's like, but he was right in this case, right? The reason why Bernie Sanders said that you should be able to vote from prison if you are a convicted felon is because in the state of Vermont, where he is a U.S. senator, you can vote from prison if you are a convicted felon. Also, you can do the same thing in the state of Maine. Now, why is it in Vermont and Maine right now you can be a convicted felon and vote from prison, but in Florida, in Georgia, in Mississippi, and a lot of those former Confederate states, you could not? It's because Maine and Vermont did not have a history of having large populations of African Americans, as well as having large populations of slaves. Their history, even though they did have slavery, at least in Maine, their history is different than those former Confederate states that took up arms against the Union and formed the Confederacy to maintain slavery. Their history is different. Let's look at this article from NBCnews.com. Most states disenfranchise felons. Maine and Vermont allow inmates to vote from prison. Advocates say the rehabilitative effects of letting inmates have a voice is profound. Now, this article is from February 26, 2018 by Jane C. Timm, Timm, for NBC News. Okay. And in the article here, it says, okay, so they talk about this gentleman, Joseph Jackson was one of the millions of Americans inspired by Barack Obama's 2008 White House bid. Let's see here. Okay, Jackson. Okay, he's 52 years old. He was convicted in Maine, one of just 2 states that allow felons to vote from behind bars. In the U.S., nearly all convicted felons are disenfranchised during their prison sentences and often barred from the ballot for years after release. Okay, now, in 2018, when Florida put on the ballot restoring voting rights to felons, at that time, only 4 states banned felons from voting for life. Florida was one of them. And that law in Florida dated back to 1868, when Florida wrote their state constitution. So all these black conservatives out here who want to talk about how slavery is behind us, slavery's in the past, slavery has nothing to do with today, they don't want to talk about laws that are in existence today that are the legacy of slavery, the vestiges of slavery, and were put in place like that 1868 felony disenfranchisement law 3 years after the Civil War ended. And it was put in place to suppress the political power of African Americans, of former slaves. Sometimes offenders lose the right to vote for life. But as the impact of felony disenfranchisement laws grows along with skyrocketing incarceration rates, others are rethinking the rules that kept 6.1 million Americans from voting in 2016. Now, under the U.S. prison population dropped each year of the Obama administration, and each year in the Biden-Harris administration, I think it's fallen some also. I don't have the exact numbers, but I know in the Obama administration, the U.S. prison population dropped each year, and the war on drugs was declining, was winding down under the Obama administration as well. But as the impact of felony disenfranchisement, Alabama, Maryland, and Wyoming all recently eased voting restrictions for released felons, while Florida organizers have put a constitutional amendment on November's ballot to give most offenders their voting rights back after completing their sentences, including for any on probation or parole. So that's 2018. So they're talking about November 2018. Meanwhile, Maine and Vermont remain unique in preserving voting rights for prisoners, and serve as a model for states like New Jersey, where Democrats newly in control of all 3 branches of government plan to propose a bill to stop the disenfranchisement of felons and allow them to vote from behind bars. Advocates say the rehabilitative effects of letting incarcerated felons have a voice in their communities are profound, while critics argue they should not be permitted to take part in any process that could end up affecting the very laws they've broken. Well, when people get out of prison and get a job, they don't have problems. They don't have a problem with taking their taxes. They don't have a problem with taking their taxes. So why shouldn't they be able to vote? Okay, read the rest of this piece here. This is at NBCnews.com. Most states disenfranchise felons. Maine and Vermont allow inmates to vote from prison. If you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 10 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th. Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles. And I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay. I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country, been hosting the African History Network show 14 years. But we look at, there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at. The 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we'll look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Walter Kamene, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nine Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class. Okay, so you can register for this. This content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me /the AHN show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment, take